Hey everyone, it's Debbie Hatch. I'm going to hop on for Friday Night Live. Hopefully not have as many issues with technology as I did last week. I know the video cut off halfway through. On Facebook, it seemed to be okay. There was a little bit of a glitch and we missed out on a couple of minutes. But for YouTube, it actually cut it in half. So I'm going to have to reshoot that one. And I plan to do that maybe tonight or tomorrow. But right now it's all working. We'll knock on something. I wanted to hop on, and tonight's topic is going to be what counts as creditable civilian service towards your CSRS and your FERS. I'm Debbie Hatch, the owner of Pinnacle Personnel Services, and I love helping people understand their federal retirement benefits. I've been doing this for a little while. So tonight's topic, as we're talking about what constitutes creditable civilian service, is important from the CSRS and the FERS perspective. When you work for the federal government, that is your retirement. CSRS, we call it the old system, 1920 to 1983. FERS, we call it the new system, sandwiched in between CSRS offset. But when you become eligible for that retirement benefit, your pension is computed by multiplying your creditable length of service times your high 3 average salary times a formula. The formula is driven by the type of work that you do and also the type of retirement that you take. The high 3 we talked about a couple of weeks ago. Tonight, I want to talk about creditable length of service. Now, in fact, that can be 7 different things. We have 3 potential pieces of civilian time, 3 potential pieces of military time, and sick leave, all added together to make creditable length of service. Tonight, we're only talking about the civilian time. So the 3 pieces include covered service. I like to tell my students in class that this is the easiest to understand type of service. So don't even read the slide that's up there right now. Just listen. Covered service means you're working for the federal government and you're contributing something into the retirement account. Now, you'll know if you're contributing something into the retirement account by looking at your leave and earnings statement or your pay stub. There'll be a deduction on there that says CSRS or CSRS offset or FERS, and it's a certain amount of money that you're paying into that trust fund. You can also find out by looking at a standard form 50 personnel action, block 30. That will indicate whether you're paying into the retirement or not, okay? So covered service means I'm working for the federal government and I'm contributing into that retirement account. If I'm paying in, I should get credit. If I'm paying in, I do, but in human resources, we call that credit covered service. That's the technical name of it. Now, the slide that's here are times that you'll get credit for paying in even though you're not. So there are exceptions to the normal definition. Super small breaks in service are not going to change anything for your retirement. Okay, example, if I'm working for your agency and we are moving, right? We're leaving and I don't have another job lined up yet. I go in, I resign from my position today, I move tomorrow, and the next day, through some miracle, a local agency contacts me, hires me, and processes me. As long as there was no more than 3 days between me leaving that job and coming into this one, doesn't change anything. It's only 3 days that we're talking about. You know as well as I do the chances of me finding this job being in process within 3 days or less, pretty slim, right? Pretty slim. Could happen, doesn't happen very often. Leave without pay happens a lot more frequently, and it is also more time. If a federal employee is on leave without pay for any reason, they get credit for up to 6 months in a calendar year towards their retirement. So if I'm working for the federal government and I request leave without pay, it's up to the agency whether they approve me or not. But let's say that I request a year, they do approve me for that whole time. Depending on when we move, some or all of that will count towards my federal retirement. If we move in June and I was approved for a year, I'd get credit for all of it because I have July to December in this calendar year and January to June in the next. I wasn't working. I wasn't paying into the retirement, but the government kept paying in there for me up to 6 months in a calendar year. If I left in January. I didn't come back into the federal government until August. I was on leave without pay that entire time. I would get credit for 6 months. But then once we got to June, my service computation date would be frozen. And when I come back in August, they're going to add 2 months to what it was before. That moves my time to the other side of that break. Workers' comp is not capped at 6 months in a calendar year. That is unlimited if the employee does return to work from that on-the-job injury. Permanent seasonal employment in places like the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, where we have a season of work and we bring on board a whole bunch of people to get us through fire season, as an example, and then once that's over, we lay them off. We want the same people to come back year after year because they're ready to come in and do the job. So as a means to entice the people to come back year after year, we do give them credit for the whole year, even though they're only working that season. That's not seasonals. That's permanent seasonal employees. That's different. And essentially what we're doing there is putting them in a non-pay status. It works like leave without pay. As long as it's not more than 6 months in the calendar year, they're still getting credit. Schedules can make a difference when we talk about your federal retirement as well. Most of our employees are working full-time, which is 80 hours in the biweekly pay period. If you're working full-time, of course, you're getting full-time credit towards retirement. It makes sense. Some employees, although I would say few, are working a schedule called intermittent. That means they work when we need them to, and that can change all the time. They might do 4 hours this week and 62 hours next week and 40 hours the week after that. Intermittent schedules give people credit only when they're actually working, not the entire time that they're being carried on the rolls. Now, part-time is different. With part-time, you have a guaranteed minimum number of hours. You didn't see that with intermittent. Part-time, I know for sure. I'm going to get my 20, my 24, my 32, whatever it is, maybe more, never less. Part-time service counts as full-time for eligibility, computation of the high 3 average salary, and it doesn't change the formula either. What happens if somebody works part-time is that there's a proration applied to their retirement benefits at the end. So for an example of this part-time schedule, if I go back to the math problem, right? You and I were hired on the very same day. You're working 40 hours a week. I'm only working 20. I don't have to work longer than you to be eligible to retire. We are working the same number of days. The hours don't matter. If the jobs were the same and had the same amount of salary assigned to them, it doesn't matter that you're bringing home the full-time paycheck and I'm bringing home the half-time paycheck. The high 3 is about the job, not the person. And if we retire the same way, the formula is the same as well. So day 1, we retire, you worked 40 hours a week, I worked 20, we have the same retirement. However, once we get to the bottom, if I have had part-time service under FERS, they're going to get into my record from the day that I was hired to the day that I retired and add up all the hours that I worked, divide that by the number of full-time hours possible. And that will drive the proration or the fraction, okay? So if I, in fact, did work 20 hours a week, my whole career, I worked 50% of the hours that a full-time person did. So you as a full-time person would get all of that retirement check. I'd get 50% of it. Okay, so that's covered service, and that's only the first part that counts as creditable service from the civilian perspective towards our retirement. We might also have something that's called non-deduction service. Now, this is just a fancy way of saying I'm working for the government, but I'm not having deductions taken away from my paycheck to go into that retirement account. These are temporary appointments. Temporaries don't have benefits, including retirement. For CSRS, it's also term appointments, but that's not the case for FERS. So if I'm in a temporary position, I'm not paying into the retirement account, does it count for retirement? And the answer would be, it depends. It depends on whether you're CSRS or FERS. It depends on when that temporary appointment was. And it depends on whether or not you're willing to pay some money today for what you didn't pay back when you were in that temporary position. So for the CSRS folks, you can see the date on the screen is October 1st of 1982. You had a temporary appointment before that. You don't have to pay for it. It's going to count both towards eligibility and computation of your retirement. But if you don't pay for it, then we're going to see how much money you earned in that temporary job. We're going to charge you for the amount that you would have paid into the retirement system for that temporary job plus interest. If you don't pay that, right, and your temporary appointment was before October of 1982, 10% of whatever this total is will be subtracted from your pension. So you don't have to pay for it. It counts for time, it counts for money, but there's a reduction at the end when we figure out your pension. That's for CSRS. If a CSRS person had a temporary appointment that was on or after October 1st of 1982, then that counts for eligibility only unless you pay the money. So if I had a temporary appointment for 2 years, I don't pay for it. That does get me 2 years closer to being able to retire, but it won't be used in the calculation of my pension. For FERS, the date is different. You see that at the bottom of the slide, January 1st of 1989. If you had a temporary or seasonal appointment before October 1st of 1989, you too have the opportunity to make this deposit, to pay for that temporary time. We look at what you earned, we charge you 1.3% of whatever you earned, plus interest, you pay that, you made a deposit, you make a deposit, this is covered service. If you had a temporary or seasonal appointment under FERS on or after January 1st of 1989, you cannot make a deposit for that time. It simply does not count. Now, there are very limited exceptions to that. One right off the top of my head I can think of is the Peace Corps. You can deposit that time even after that 1989 cutoff, but most of the time you cannot. Now, what if I did have a time-limited appointment and I don't really know whether I was paying into the retirement or not? Because remember, terms under FERS can, temps don't. I know it had a time limit, but I don't know what it was. I can go back and look at the standard form 50 from that appointment. Block 30 will tell you if you were paying into retirement. So block 30 can say any number of things. It might say CSRS, or CSRS offset, or CSRS special, or FERS Ray, FERS Fray, FERS special. If it says CSRS or FERS in any way, that was a covered position. You're good. If block 30 says FICA, FICA, and nothing else, that means that you were paying into Social Security and nothing else. That's a non-deduction appointment. And so then you can go back and look at these dates as far as whether you're CSRS or FERS and whether you can make that deposit or not. The third piece of civilian time that we have is called Redeposit Service. This means that the federal employee was working in a covered position. They were paying in. At some point, they resigned. They left the government and they contacted the Office of Personnel Management. They pulled their money out of the pension account. They took it with them. And after a period of time, they came back to the government. They have the opportunity, it's completely voluntary, to redeposit the money that they pulled out with interest, of course. If that money is redeposited, it's covered service. If it isn't redeposited, it depends on whether the person was CSRS or FERS, and once again, when did this happen? So for CSRS, you can see the date here is March 1st of 1991. If I pulled my money out for work done prior to March 1st of 1991, and I'm a CSRS person, I don't have to put it back. It's going to count for eligibility and computation, but there'll be a reduction, just like there was with that temporary appointment. This one isn't 10% though. It's based on life expectancy. So they look at my age at the time of retirement, my life expectancy, and they compute the penalty that way. If I'm a CSRS person and I pulled money out for work that I did on or after March 1st of 1991, I don't have to put it back, but if I don't, that time only counts for eligibility. It gets me to retirement, but it doesn't get me a bigger retirement payment. It isn't included in my pension. And that's always the way it is for FERS. Under FERS, if I pulled money out and I don't put it back, it counts for eligibility, but not computation. So here's the example that I give in my classroom. I'm a FERS person. I worked for 5 years. I quit. I pull that 5 years out. I go get a job outside of the government somewhere, and eventually I come back to the government. I don't pay back that 5 years. I work another 15. 5 and 15 is 20. If I have 20 years of creditable service and I'm 60, I can retire. But my retirement payment, my annuity, is only going to be computed on 15 years unless I pay that 5 back. Okay, so short and sweet tonight. That is creditable civilian service, covered non-deduction redeposit. Please let me know if there is any topic that you would like to talk about regarding federal retirement, federal insurances, Social Security, Medicare, TSP. I would be happy to talk about it on another Friday Night Live. I hope you take care of yourself, and I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much.